Marcus Chen stared at the termination notice floating on his personal display, the red text burning into his retinas like a brand. 3 years aboard the Stellar Harmony. 3 years of keeping every system running smooth as silk. And this was how it ended. Fired. Dismissed. Cast out like space debris. Unauthorized modification of client vessels, he read aloud, his voice echoing in his tiny quarters. Violation of Galactic Maritime Protocol, 7 Alpha. Breach of contract terms regarding non-interference with external craft. The charges were technically true. He had modified 2 ships. He had interfered with external craft, but the bureaucratic language stripped away every ounce of context. Every second of the terror he'd felt watching those vessels drift helplessly toward the gravity well of Kepler 442b. Captain Vex High had delivered the news with the cold efficiency typical of her species. The Zentorian's 4 eyes had fixed on him with what might have been disappointment. Though reading emotion in those crystalline features was like trying to interpret weather patterns on a gas giant. Your actions, while perhaps well-intentioned, have created significant legal complications for our operation, she had said, her translator rendering her clicks and whistles into perfectly modulated standard. The Galactic Shipping Consortium has filed formal complaints. Our insurance rates will triple. You leave us no choice, Marcus Chen. 3 hours later, here he was, packing his few belongings into a regulation duffel, waiting for the next transport to drop him at Kepler Station. From there, he'd catch whatever freight hauler would take a blacklisted engineer back toward human space. Marcus pulled up the incident report on his personal terminal, reading it for the dozenth time. Maybe he could find something, some detail the investigators had missed, something to prove he'd done the right thing. Incident report. Stellar Harmony, commercial vessel. Date. 2387.156. Location. Kepler, 442. System, Outer Belt. Reporting Officer. Captain Vex High more than. At 0347 ship time, Engineer Marcus Chen reported 2 vessels in distress approximately 40,000 kilometers off our starboard bow. Initial sensor sweeps confirmed both craft were experiencing critical system failures and were caught in the gravity field of Kepler 442b, with projected impact in 14.7 standard hours. Engineer Chen requested permission to render assistance. Permission was denied due to strict company policy regarding non-scheduled stops and the associated fuel costs. Engineer Chen was ordered to file a standard distress beacon report with Kepler station authorities. At 0412 ship time, Engineer Chen was discovered in Maintenance Bay 7, having constructed an unauthorized gravitational pulse generator using components from our backup deflector array. When confronted, Engineer Chen stated his intention to deploy the device to nudge both distressed vessels out of their decay orbit. Despite direct orders to cease his activities, Engineer Chen activated the device at 0419. The pulse successfully altered the trajectory of both vessels, moving them into stable orbit around the 4th planet. However, the discharge damaged our primary navigation array and required emergency repairs that delayed our arrival at Vega Prime by 18 hours. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Engineer Chen had not verified the ownership or registration of the assisted vessels before rendering aid. This violation of Protocol 7 Alpha, combined with his insubordination and unauthorized use of ship materials, constitutes grounds for immediate termination. Marcus closed the report and leaned back in his narrow bunk. Unauthorized use of ship materials. Insubordination. Violation of protocols. That's all they saw, not the 2 ships that would have burned up in Kepler 442b's atmosphere, not the lives that hung in the balance. He'd built the gravitational pulse generator in less than 30 minutes, cannibalizing parts from 3 different systems and jury-rigging connections that should have taken hours to calculate. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't standard, but it worked. The pulse had been perfectly calibrated, nudging both ships into a stable orbit without damaging their hulls or killing anyone inside with sudden acceleration. But nobody seemed to care about that part. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. Marcus opened it to find Kezekth, the ship's Altarian quartermaster. The insectoid alien's compound eyes glittered in the corridor's soft lighting. Human Marcus, Kezekth chittered, mandibles clicking in what Marcus had learned was the Altarian equivalent of a frown. This one brings unauthorized farewell gift. The alien handed him a small data chip. Security recordings. From Maintenance Base 7. Perhaps useful for future employment verification. Marcus took the chip, surprised. Kzekth. If they find out you copied these, they will not find out, the Altarian replied firmly. This one has observed human Marcus for many cycles. Actions were correct, proper. Rules are not always justice. Before Marcus could respond, Kzekth scuttled away down the corridor, leaving him holding the data chip and wondering if he'd misunderstood the alien's moral compass all these years. An hour later, the transport Lucky Strike docked with the Stellar Harmony. Marcus grabbed his duffel and made his way to the airlock, passing crew members who either avoided his gaze or offered quick, guilty nods. Word traveled fast on a ship this size. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Yithara surprised him at the airlock. The Delphinian's blue-green skin was darker than usual, indicating stress. Marcus, she said, her voice carrying the melodic quality of her Waterworld origins. Before you go, I wanted you to know that what you did, it was brave. Foolish, perhaps, but brave. Thanks, Doc, Marcus replied, hefting his bag. Though brave and foolish got me fired, so maybe there's a lesson in there somewhere. Perhaps, Doctor. Yithara agreed. But consider this. In 30 years of space medicine, I have learned that the difference between a hero and a fool is often simply a matter of timing and perspective. The transport captain, a gruff human named Rodriguez, barely looked up from his manifest as Marcus boarded. Chen? Yeah. I got you down for Kepler Station. Fair warning. It's a rough dock these days. Pirates, smugglers, the usual riffraff. Keep your head down and your credits hidden. Marcus found a seat in the cramped passenger compartment and stared out the porthole as the Stellar Harmony grew smaller. 3 years of his life. Shrinking to a distant point of light against the stars, he plugged in his personal terminal and inserted Kzekth's data chip, curious to see what the quartermaster had thought worth stealing. The security footage loaded, showing him in Maintenance Base 7, frantically assembling his gravitational pulse generator. Watching himself work, Marcus was struck by how desperate he'd looked. His hands had been shaking as he'd rerouted power couplings and recalibrated field generators. Not from fear, but from adrenaline, from the knowledge that every second counted. That 2 ships full of beings were falling toward their deaths while he played with spare parts and hope. The footage showed him testing the device, running calculations on his handheld, making last-minute adjustments. Then came Captain Vex High, flanked by Security Chief Groktar, ordering him to stand down. Engineer Chen, you will cease this activity immediately, the captain's voice crackled through the recording. We have filed the required distress report. Kepler Station will dispatch rescue vessels. Captain, with respect, those vessels will impact the planet in 12 hours. Marcus heard himself reply, not looking up from his work. Kepler Station's fastest response time to this sector is 20 hours minimum. They'll be dead before help arrives. That is not our responsibility, Captain Vex High had responded. Our insurance does not cover unauthorized rescue operations. The company has made its position clear. Then the company's position is wrong, Marcus had said, and activated the device. Watching it now, Marcus felt a mix of pride and regret. He'd saved those ships, whoever they belonged to. But he'd also destroyed his career in the process. 3 years of spotless service records, wiped out in 30 minutes of unauthorized heroism. The transport shuddered as it disengaged from the Stellar Harmony's docking clamps. Through the porthole, Marcus watched his former home disappear into the star field, carrying on with its scheduled route to Vega Prime as if nothing had happened, as if 2 ships hadn't been saved, as if the universe hadn't noticed one small act of defiance against the cruel mathematics of corporate policy. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. All passengers, we're looking at a 6-hour flight to Kepler Station. Meals are available for purchase, and the head's in the back if you need it. Try to keep your personal crises to a minimum. I've got a schedule to keep. Marcus leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. 6 hours to figure out what came next. 6 hours to decide if saving 2 unknown ships had been worth destroying his life over. Deep down, though, he already knew the answer. Given the choice again, he'd build that gravitational pulse generator twice as fast and smile while he did it. Some things mattered more than protocol, more than careers, more than the comfortable safety of following orders. He just hoped the universe would eventually agree. Kepler Station was exactly as advertised. A rough dock floating in the outer rim of nowhere. The massive ring structure rotated slowly against the star field, its hull scarred by meteor impacts and jury-rigged repairs that spoke of decades of hard use. Ships of every description clung to its docking spokes like parasites on a dying whale. Marcus shouldered his duffel and followed the other passengers through the station's cramped corridors. The air recyclers wheezed with mechanical exhaustion, filling the atmosphere with the metallic taste of overworked filtration systems. Holographic advertisements flickered in multiple languages, hawking everything from black market cybernetics to suspiciously fresh Terran beef. He found a cheap room in Sector 7, a coffin-sized space barely large enough for a fold-down bunk and a terminal. The proprietor, a heavily augmented human named Gutierrez, took his credits with the disinterested efficiency of someone who'd seen too many desperate travelers pass through. "Meal vouchers are extra," Gutierrez said, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Marcus. "And if you're looking for work, check the job boards in the cantina. Lot of ships come through here, needing quick fixes and no questions asked." Marcus spent his first day on the station wandering the job boards, but his termination from the Stellar Harmony had already propagated through the shipping networks. Every decent position required a clean record, and his file now carried the black mark of insubordination. The only offers came from smugglers and pirates, ships that operated in the gray spaces between laws. On his second day, nursing a synthy beer in the station's main cantina, Marcus was approached by an unexpected visitor. She was tall, pale, and moved with the fluid grace that marked her as one of the ethereal collective. Though she wore civilian clothes rather than the flowing robes typical of her species. "Marcus Chen," she said, settling into the seat across from him without invitation. "My name is Saren Hivel then. I have been looking for you." Marcus set down his drink carefully. The ethereals were known for their psychic abilities and their tendency toward cryptic pronouncements. An ethereal seeking him out specifically couldn't be good news. "If you're here about the incident with the ships, I've already been fired," he said. "There's nothing left to punish." Serenhai's silver eyes studied him with uncomfortable intensity. "Punishment? No, Marcus Chen. I am here because of what you saved." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, his personal terminal chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as anonymous, but the message made his blood run cold. Private communication, encrypted. Marcus Chen, former engineer of the Stellar Harmony. You are in possession of something that belongs to us. The data chip given to you by the Altarian contains information of significant value. You have 48 standard hours to transfer this data to the coordinates attached to this message. Failure to comply will result in consequences you will not enjoy. We know where you are. Marcus looked up to find Serenhai watching him with apparent concern. You received a threatening message, she observed. Your emotional resonance shifted dramatically. How did you? Marcus began, then remembered he was talking to an ethereal. Right. Psychic. Can you tell who sent it? No, she replied. But I suspect it relates to the recording chip you carry. May I ask what it contains? Marcus hesitated, then pulled out the chip Kazek had given him. Security footage from when I built the gravitational pulse generator. I haven't looked at all of it yet. Perhaps you should, Serenhai suggested. But not here. Your room would be safer. 20 minutes later, they were crowded into Marcus's tiny quarters, watching the security footage on his terminal. The early part was familiar. His frantic assembly of the pulse generator, the confrontation with Captain Vex High, the successful deployment that saved both ships. But Kizek had included more than just the incident footage. The chip contained sensor logs from the entire encounter, including detailed scans of the 2 rescued ships. There, Serenhai said, pointing to a data stream Marcus had initially ignored. The ship identification codes. Do you recognize them? Marcus enhanced the display, studying the registration numbers that appeared briefly in the sensor data. His blood turned to ice as the implications hit him. VSS Silent Dawn, he read aloud. VSS, whispered Hope. These are Vanguard intelligence ships. Military, Black Ops. The Vanguard was the galaxy's premier peacekeeping force, but their intelligence division operated in the shadows, conducting operations that officially didn't exist. Their ships were among the most sophisticated in known space, equipped with stealth systems and weaponry that could level small moons. Why were Vanguard intelligence ships drifting helplessly toward a planet? Marcus wondered aloud. These vessels are built to survive anything short of a direct hit from a Nova cannon. Serenhai's expression grew troubled. Perhaps because they were not supposed to survive, she said quietly. Marcus stared at her. You think someone sabotaged them? I think, Serenhai replied, that someone very powerful wanted those ships and their crews to disappear without a trace. A gravitational impact would have destroyed all evidence, made it look like a navigation accident in a hazardous system. The implications crashed over Marcus like a wave. If Serenhai was right, he hadn't just saved 2 ships. He'd prevented an assassination, possibly exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of galactic government. But who would have that kind of power? He asked. Who could sabotage Vanguard intelligence ships? Someone with access to Vanguard technology, Serenhai answered. Someone who knew their roots, their security protocols. Someone inside the organization itself. Marcus's terminal chimed again. Another anonymous message, this one containing coordinates for a meeting location and a time. 2,100 hours, Docking Bay, 94. The message was brief. Come alone. Bring the chip. Last warning. They're getting impatient, Marcus observed. Serenhai stood, her pale features set with determination. Then we should act quickly. There is something else you should know, Marcus Chen. The reason I sought you out. I'm listening. I am not merely a member of the Ethereal Collective, she said. I am a Vanguard intelligence operative. The Silent Dawn was my ship. Marcus felt the world tilt around him. You were on one of those ships? But the crew manifest was classified, Serenhai finished. As was our mission. We were investigating reports of corruption within Vanguard Command, following a trail of stolen weapons and murdered agents. Someone discovered our investigation and arranged for our ships to suffer accidents during routine patrol. How many of you were there? 43 souls across both vessels, she replied. All alive because of your actions. And all now officially dead. According to the reports that will have been filed. Marcus sank into his bunk, overwhelmed. So, what happens now? Now, we use the situation to our advantage, Serenhai said. The conspirators believe their problem is solved. They think the evidence died with us. But you have proof that we survived, and more importantly, you have the sensor logs showing what really happened to our ships. She moved to the terminal, her fingers dancing over the controls with practiced efficiency. I am transmitting a secure communication to certain allies within Vanguard Command. People I trust. But first, we need to deal with your immediate problem. The anonymous threats? Whoever sent them wants that chip destroyed. They cannot afford to have anyone examine the full sensor logs too closely. Serenhai's silver eyes gleamed. So, we will give them exactly what they want. We're giving up the chip? We are giving them a chip, she corrected with a slight smile. Whether it contains what they expect is another matter entirely. Serenhai produced a blank data chip from her pocket and inserted it into the terminal. Standard security footage from your incident, nothing more. The real sensor logs will remain safely hidden. As she worked, Marcus found himself studying this unexpected ally. The Ethereals were known for their calm, philosophical approach to conflict. But there was steel beneath Serenhai's serene exterior, a core of determination that spoke of hard choices and harder truths. Why trust me? He asked suddenly. Serenhai paused in her work, turning to face him. In 3 years of monitoring galactic shipping routes, I have observed perhaps 10,000 vessels encounter distress calls. Do you know how many stopped to render aid when it was not profitable or required by law? Marcus shook his head. 7, she said. 7 ships out of 10,000. And of those 7, only 1 involved a single individual, acting against direct orders from his superiors to save strangers he had never met. She resumed her work on the decoy chip. Trust is not about knowing someone, Marcus Chen. It is about recognizing the measure of their character when it truly matters. The terminal chimed as her work finished. The decoy is ready, she announced, but I want you to understand the risks. These people have already demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect their secrets. Even after we give them what they think they want, you may remain a target. Marcus thought about his ruined career, his empty bank account, his uncertain future. Then he thought about 43 souls who were alive because he'd spent 30 minutes building something impossible out of spare parts and determination. Then I guess we'd better make sure they don't get the chance, he said. Serenhai's smile was like starlight breaking through clouds. Now you begin to understand why the Vanguard is so interested in recruiting humans, she said. Your species has a remarkable talent for finding third options when presented with impossible choices. Docking Bay 94 was a cathedral of rust and shadows, its vast space lit by flickering industrial lights that cast dancing silhouettes across the metal deck. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, the decoy chip burning like a coal in his pocket. The real sensor logs were safely encrypted and hidden in his personal terminal, ready to transmit to Serenhai's allies at the first sign of trouble. He didn't have to wait long. At exactly 2,100 hours, 3 figures emerged from behind a stack of cargo containers. The leader was human, tall, and broad-shouldered, with the kind of augmented features that spoke of military enhancement. The other 2 were clearly muscle, a scarred Catherian, and a synthetic humanoid whose glowing eyes marked it as high-end combat model. Marcus Chen, the leader said, his voice carrying the crisp accent of the core worlds. I'm Commander Reeves, Vanguard Internal Security. You have something that belongs to us. Marcus kept his hands visible but ready. Funny thing about that, I checked the ownership records for those 2 ships I saved. Both of them belonged to Vanguard Intelligence, not Internal Security. Commander Reeves smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Bureaucratic details. Internal Security has jurisdiction over all intelligence assets during active investigations. And what investigation would that be? Exactly. The investigation into how classified Vanguard vessels ended up in civilian hands, Reeves replied smoothly. We have reason to believe stolen intelligence protocols were being used to track and intercept our ships. The words were carefully chosen, Marcus realized. Technically true, but twisted to paint him as a criminal rather than a hero. So you're saying I somehow arranged for those ships to nearly crash into a planet so I could… What? Steal their computers? I'm saying you possess detailed sensor logs of classified Vanguard operations without authorization, Reeves said, his patience clearly wearing thin. That constitutes espionage under Section 12 of the Galactic Security Act. Marcus almost laughed. Espionage? I'm an engineer who got fired for saving lives. But sure, let's say I'm some kind of master spy. Why are you here making deals instead of just arresting me? The Catherian stepped forward, its forearms spreading in what Marcus recognized as a threatening gesture. But Commander Reeves held up a hand, keeping his muscle in check. Because we're reasonable people, Reeves said. You return the sensor logs. We overlook your unauthorized interference with Vanguard operations. Everyone walks away clean. And if I refuse? Reeves shrugged. Kepler Station is a dangerous place. Ships disappear. Accidents happen. It would be tragic if a disgraced engineer met with an unfortunate fate. While seeking employment in the Outer Rim, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the decoy chip, holding it up where all 3 could see it. You know what the funny thing is? I actually considered just giving you this and walking away. My career's already ruined. Why make more trouble for myself? A wise attitude, Reeves agreed, extending his hand for the chip. Except, Marcus continued, not moving to hand it over, I kept thinking about something. If you really were internal security investigating intelligence leaks, You'd have just taken me into custody. Official channels, legal procedures, all that bureaucratic dance you military types love so much. Reeves's expression darkened. Mr. Chen, I strongly advise you to. But instead, Marcus pressed on, you're here in a dark docking bay, threatening a civilian, trying to make evidence disappear. Which means you're not internal security at all. You're the people who tried to kill those 43 Vanguard operatives. The Catherian's forearms snapped toward weapons concealed beneath its coat. But Marcus was already moving. Not toward cover, as they expected, but toward them. He threw himself forward in a desperate tackle, knowing his only chance was to get close enough that they couldn't use their weapons without risking hitting each other. The move caught them off guard, but only for a second. The synthetic's enhanced reflexes kicked in, and a metallic fist slammed into Marcus's ribs with enough force to crack bone. He gasped, rolling away as the Catherian's plasma pistol whined to life. Enough, Reeves barked. We need him alive until we have the chip. That was when the docking bay's lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Marcus heard the distinctive hum of ethereal technology. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red, and he saw Serenhai descending from the upper gantries on tendrils of psychic force. Her pale form wreathed in silver light. Marcus Chen, she called, her voice carrying impossible authority. The transmission is complete. Vanguard Command has the evidence they need. The synthetic spun toward this new threat, its arm transforming into some kind of energy cannon. But Serenhai was faster, her psychic abilities seizing control of the machine's motor functions. The synthetic froze mid-turn, its systems locked in an electronic cage. Commander Reeves drew his sidearm, a military-grade pulse pistol. One more step and I burn him down, he snarled, aiming at Marcus. You are Director Nathaniel Reeves, Serenhai said calmly, still floating in the air like an avenging angel. Former Vanguard Intelligence, current leader of the Shadow Compact. My investigation team has been tracking your organization for 8 months. Reeves's face went white. That's impossible. The Silent Dawn and Whispered Hope were destroyed. All hands lost. All hands officially lost, Serenhai corrected, but surviving nonetheless, thanks to the actions of this remarkable human. She gestured toward Marcus, who was slowly getting to his feet, clutching his injured ribs. You don't understand, Reeves said desperately. The Compact isn't the enemy here. We're trying to save the galaxy from itself. The Vanguard is corrupt, compromised from within. We had to act. By murdering 43 innocent operatives? Marcus demanded, anger overriding his pain. By eliminating a threat to galactic security, Reeves shot back. Your interference has doomed billions. The intelligence we were protecting was fabricated, Serenhai interrupted. Designed to justify your coup attempt against Vanguard Command. We have the real documents, Director Reeves. We know about the arms deals with the hegemony raiders. We know about the assassination of Admiral Corvash. We know everything. The Kytherian, forgotten in the standoff, suddenly lurched into motion, all 4 arms bringing weapons to bear. But instead of firing at Serenhai or Marcus, it aimed at Director Reeves. Nothing personal, Director, it hissed in its mechanical voice. But the Compact has contingency protocols. Reeves spun, his eyes wide with betrayal, but he was too late. 4 plasma bolts took him center mass, dropping him to the deck in a smoking heap. The Catherian immediately turned its weapons toward Marcus and Serenhai. Witnesses are a liability, it explained with mechanical calm. Calm. That was when Marcus did something that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of diving for cover or trying to run, he stepped forward, placing himself between the armed alien and Serenhai. You want to know what your bosses didn't count on? He said, his voice steady despite the plasma rifles aimed at his chest. They didn't count on someone building a gravitational pulse generator out of spare parts in 30 minutes. They didn't count on an ethereal operative surviving in space long enough to reach a rescue ship. And they sure as hell didn't count on a fired engineer being stubborn enough to dig into a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of galactic government. The Catherian's weapons hummed as they charged for a killing shot, Human arrogance. You will die for your... Its words were cut off as the synthetic, still under Serenhai's psychic control, grabbed the alien from behind in a crushing embrace. The Catherian's plasma rifles discharged harmlessly into the deck as its bones snapped under inhuman pressure. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus found himself shaking with adrenaline and delayed terror. "Is it over?" he asked. "The immediate threat, yes," Serenhai replied, settling gently to the deck. But this was merely one cell of a larger conspiracy. The Shadow Compact has operatives throughout Vanguard Command, possibly extending into civilian governments as well. So what happens now? Serenhai's silver eyes studied him with what might have been speculation. Now, Marcus Chen, you have a choice. You could disappear into the Outer Rim, find work with a freight company, live a quiet life far from galactic politics, or you could accept a commission with Vanguard Intelligence. Your actions have exposed the largest internal threat to galactic security in over a century. Your innovative thinking and moral courage are exactly the qualities we need in this fight. Marcus looked around the docking bay, taking in the bodies, the smoke, the evidence of violence and conspiracy. 3 days ago, his biggest worry had been a routine engine maintenance schedule. Now he was standing in the middle of a galactic conspiracy, being offered a chance to join the shadow war that apparently raged behind the peaceful facade of civilized space. "What exactly would I be signing up for?" he asked. "Uncertainty," Serenhai replied honestly. "Danger. The knowledge that your enemies will have access to resources and technology beyond imagination, but also the chance to make a real difference, to protect billions of innocent lives from those who would exploit them." Marcus thought about Captain Vexhai, about company policies that prioritized profit over lives. He thought about Director Reeves and his twisted justifications for mass murder. He thought about 43 people who were alive because someone had cared enough to break the rules. "You know what the ironic thing is?" he said finally. "I got fired for fixing 2 ships. Turns out those ships needed fixing in more ways than one." Serenhai smiled, the expression transforming her austere features. "Is that a yes, Engineer Chen?" Marcus looked down at the decoy chip, still clutched in his hand. Such a small thing to have caused so much trouble. "You said humans have a talent for finding third options when presented with impossible choices?" "Indeed. Well, here's a third option nobody saw coming." Marcus crushed the chip underfoot, grinding the fragments into the deck. A fired engineer from a third-rate cargo hauler just brought down a conspiracy that reached the top levels of galactic government. Not bad for someone with a black mark on his employment record. "Not bad at all," Serenhai agreed. "Welcome to Vanguard Intelligence, Agent Chen." As they walked toward the docking bay exit, stepping carefully around the bodies and debris, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since leaving Earth. Purpose. The universe was vast and dangerous and full of people who would sacrifice others for their own gain. But it was also full of possibilities, of chances to build something better out of the broken pieces of what came before. He'd been fired from his crew for fixing 2 ships. But maybe, just maybe, he'd found something worth fixing that was bigger than any ship. The future itself. Behind them, Kepler Station continued its endless rotation against the stars, unaware that the balance of galactic power had just shifted in a forgotten docking bay. And in the darkness between worlds, the real work was just beginning.